Charles Oliveira versus Dan Hooker could be next, since the UFC are interested in making this fight happen. Now, who would win this fight? Well, before we talk about who would win this fight, let's take a look at their latest performances, in which Charles Oliveira fought Benio DeRusse, in which Charles Oliveira dropped and put a lot of punishment on Benio DeRusse, in which the rest enough and start the fight in round 1.
Oh, he's hurt bad. It's over. It's over. Charles Oliveira.
After this, Charles Oliveira went on to fight Arman Tsarukyan at UFC 300, in which it was a very close fight. Both went back and forth. Both of the striking, grappling, and ground game was great, but Arman Tsarukyan ended up taking it by decision.
By split decision, Arman.
Now let's take a look at Dan Hooker's latest performances, in which he fought Jalen Turner, in which both started out very fast in round 1. Both got rocked in round 2.
To the ground. Hooker to close the range though. He's got to move his head.
Dan Hooker then dropped Jalen Turner in round 3. And Dan Hooker ended up taking it by decision. After this, we all know Jalen Turner just fought Mateus Gamrot, in which both got dropped in round 1. Both went back and forth, both had some great shots and kicks, but Dan Hooker ended up taking it by decision.
Now, here's the thing about this fight. I hope this fight is not next for Charles Oliveira, because if it is, it's a total disrespect towards Charles Oliveira, because Dan Hooker is not worthy of stepping in the octagon with somebody like Charles Oliveira, who's a former world champion and who has ran through the biggest names in the lightweight division. And the reason I say that is because Dan Hooker hasn't shown to have the best skills in all realms of fighting, whether it's striking, grappling, or wrestling, on top of the fact that he hasn't accomplished anything huge. The biggest thing he has done is rob Mateus Gamrot from a victory. But if for some reason the UFC actually believes that Dan Hooker deserved that win against Mateus Gamrot, and Dan Hooker actually believes that he has what it takes to beat Charles Oliveira, well, then he's gonna have to show it. Which I believe that we'll see Charles Oliveira easily stop Dan Hooker, and since Charles Oliveira is dangerous in all realms of fighting, he can either outclass and expose Dan Hooker's striking, or he can make it a grappling match and take the fight to the ground and look forward to submitting Dan Hooker. So in the end, I do got Charles Oliveira winning this fight, and I don't believe that Dan Hooker will be able to survive all rounds.